artist, writer, motivational speaker. She's the author of the Connecticut Press award-winning memoir, My Beautiful Detour, An Unthinkable Journey from Gutless to Grateful. Tonight, she's here to share with us some creative resilience strategies she's developed over the course of her own journey as a detourist. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Amy Oestreicher. Take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my virtual author talks. I'm excited to do this now, especially now because this has been a very uncertain time for all of us. Many of us feel like we're in this kind of stagnant period and we don't know when things are going to change. And we hear a lot of things about things reopening and things going back to normal. And we all want things to go back to our normal life, but there is no real guarantee of anything. And when we do go back to that, obviously, we will have been changed for our experience. And I was thinking about how I'm making it through day to day and how we all are trying to make it one day at a time with no definite end in sight. And I can't help but think about how this is something I really had to learn myself years ago when I was 18, coming into a completely new world where I didn't have an endpoint in sight. That's what I wanted to share with you, how I got through. That's the story of my memoir, My Beautiful Detour. And I wanted to talk with you about it and also share some of the tools. I'm going to briefly talk about some of the strategies and exercises, but I will email anyone the full packet of these worksheets and exercises for anyone that does get a copy tonight of the book. Here we go. I have a little PowerPoint since I'm not there in person. Let's see. So yeah, 5 months ago, which was, January, February-ish, think about what you were telling yourself, who you were, what your home is. I believe the world is. Who knew that everything would change seemingly overnight, or maybe to us, it felt like something drastically flipped on its head overnight. So what if you woke up one day and your answers were forever changed? You kind of felt like that. And that is really literally how I felt with my story. I'm 33 now, but this was my high school graduation picture. Many of you know teenagers and college students and many students who are having a very atypical graduation. And mine was certainly atypical because this is walking the beautiful hallways of Columbia Presbyterian ICU. Apparently, I was their only high school graduation ceremony in the surgical ICU, which was very unexpected to me. And that's where I'm going to start. Eventually, I wrote a show about it, which is this last picture here, but it took a few detours to get to that point. Oh, there's my screen. But what good story doesn't have a detour? So pandemic aside, who hasn't had something unexpected in their life, whether it be getting lost walking around, or a new show you didn't expect to see on TV. There are small detours, there are long detours, and how many of us have had times where we're not really sure where our path is going, and that's what a detour is to me. So my detour started, by the way, this is all art I created many years later. Art was never an interest of mine growing up, and a beautiful surprising flower on my detour, which I'll get into later, but for now it's illustrating my journey. So growing up, I saw creativity everywhere. I love musical theater, mostly because I loved bringing these stories I'd read to life. I was very inspired by the hidden life all around me, which I saw in nature, in trees. And now that we've been in quarantine, I have lots of time for those nature walks and finding that hidden life and inspiration. But that was my world, and trees were really how I found my foundation and guidance. Trauma hit when I was 17. I was studying with a voice teacher who became my mentor at the age of 15 in New York. And he really became a very big role in my life, especially for someone so driven towards musical theater. And then when I was 17, I was sexually abused by him for a period of months. And I froze. I went out of body, which is a term I wouldn't understand until many years later. But for me, I just knew something had shifted in me, and I wasn't really sure. And later on, when I discovered art, I was finally able to really express what it felt like. It felt like something within me had changed from, you see red to blue, and then also this painting on the right, this sense of numbness, that everything, I was suddenly in a fog, and I didn't know what to attribute it to. I kept that secret inside for months until I really felt like something within me was just violently wrong. And finally, I could put words to it. And I told my mom the April of my senior year, around my 18th birthday, which was April 10th, 2005. And then 2 weeks later, my stomach had developed a very big blood clot, and I experienced that as a ton of pain. I was rushed to the emergency room, and my stomach had ruptured. And I was in the emergency room when surgeons cut into me. There was so much internal pressure that my stomach had exploded, and I was in a coma at 18. And this was a week after I had gotten my college acceptance letters, and I thought I was going to study musical theater, and I was driven, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I'm sure there are many high school seniors out there that applied way back at the beginning of the year and thought they were going right ahead, and my world was completely in flux. So when I woke up months later, the first thing I wanted to know was, well, aren't I going to college? What's going on? I'd never really been in a hospital before, so I didn't understand why I could only see the ceiling, and suddenly I had no strength anymore, when in my head I was just in dance class like a few weeks before. And then I'll get to that. But then doctors finally told me what had happened after I'd been there and acclimated to the ICU after a few months, when they said I didn't have a stomach anymore and I couldn't eat or drink. And they just didn't know when that would happen again, or if it would happen again. So the first thing you want to know when you hear something devastating like that is when. Give me a date, give me a time, or give me a guarantee. Tell me that I can eat at least. But there was none of that. So coming out of the hospital, I was hoping for at least some kind of certainty, or to feel like I was somewhat in my old life. But it was the same uncertainty back in the world. I had to just play the waiting game at home, on nutritional IVs, with, tubes and bags coming out of me, wondering when that day would happen that I could eat and drink and just be normal again, have my own strength and feel like myself. Nothing felt the same. So how did I get through? Because shooting ahead, it turned into about 6 years unable to eat or drink anything, and 28 surgeries. So at that time, I knew none of that. And I always think to myself, if I knew it would have been that long, I would have given up. But all I had was the idea that, okay, maybe it will happen soon. It will happen soon. And so how I got through from that moment to moment, day to day of total uncertainty, there goes my screen again. I realized way in retrospect, that it was 4 skills that I've boiled down to. And when I tell people the names of these 4 skills, gratitude, creativity, hope, and stories, they seem like really cheesy, just like big words you see on like the posters at Home Goods. But they were really all I had. I didn't really have any kind of formal, therapy, because I couldn't afford to talk about my feelings, because anything I really felt would make me feel hunger. And so I had to stay relatively numb to get through being at home in the real world and not even being able to have an ice cube. So I really had to resource whatever I had around me. And so all I had were these basic things. And so I'm going to, talk a little bit about how each of these steps, how I incorporate them from day to day. So this was one of my biggest detours after my Coma detour. This was 13 surgeries later, and 3 years after I was 21, and I finally had an operation where I thought I would be able to eat again, and I could eat for about a week, but the surgery didn't work very well, and my wound exploded, and it took another 3 years before surgeons could work out something else. So I'm just bringing this up now because sometimes we overcome one detour and another detour sprouts out of that. I think we realize that, detours are never ending. Our lives are made of all of these winding paths and detours. So these 4 skills are mindsets that we really have to keep practicing again and again and build it in our muscle memory. Just like now, I'm practicing these skills as we wait for things to shift. So my first skill is hope. And hope is an interesting word. You can find a lot of inspirational quotes about hope. But I've found that hope isn't just this lovely beam of light that comes to you when you just say, okay, I'm hopeful. It's making us feel something that we don't really feel authentically. Hope you have to actively work for. It's a job. You have to actively cultivate hope. You have to create it. And an example of that is when you read a fiction story or a fairy tale, you're only going to believe that Little Red Riding Hood, talk to a wolf if you practice willing suspension of disbelief. You have to tell yourself that you are creating a lie. And an example for me is, when I'm discharged from the hospital and no one is telling me anything, if it's even possible to hook up my digestive system again, what I ended up doing was I wrote big numbers on my wall in my room and said 7 days till I can eat again. Then I did 6 days, 5 days. And when it got to 0, I just restarted at 7, 6, 5, 4, and I did that for years and years. And just seeing those numbers go down was a way that I could give myself hope. And I think of that like an athlete running a marathon and just seeing the finish line, right ahead. So it was something I had to keep creating, and that hope is the fuel that kept me going from day to day. And that's the truth of getting through any, really big detour in life is you just have to see the next day or the next moment. So that was how hope really helped me. Um, and you have to create your own hope. Many people are like, how did you do this? But for one of the times that I couldn't eat, because that was another unfortunate thing on my detour, I would be hooked up to eat, and then some other surgery would go wrong, and suddenly I would be unable to eat for 1 or 2 years or 3 months, or, eating became like a switch I would have to turn on and off. And for one of those times, I was so hungry and I didn't want to let go of the idea of food that I turned to cooking, and being with those smells and tastes and textures was a way I could visualize that for myself and believe that that would happen in the future. So just one of the many ways, but you really have to think to yourself, how can I create just enough hope to get me till tomorrow or just till the next hour? And you don't think of the end point, because who knows what the end point is. Okay, number 2, which is kind of the all-encompassing skill too, but so important, creativity. So I've always been a theater kid and consider myself creative, but you don't have to consider yourself an artist or into creative arts to be creative. Creativity is a mindset. It's how we look at something and in a different way. It's a great way to problem solve and think out of the box. So we need creativity as a mindset to help us look at something in our lives that might appear as an obstacle or not what you expected, and see it. How do I get that? Come on. Oh, here we go. One thing I'm wonderfully terrible at is technology. And I'm also going to put the information in here too if you want to send me an email privately, or I have the information on getting my book. And for anyone that does, I'll send you all these worksheets. And I can eat now, I must say. I can eat now. I'm good. And I also have to say too, I have a link to, I started selling some of my artwork as masks, and on Redbubble, that have some of my artwork, and they're really comfy, but you can check those out too. Sorry, I had way too much fun designing those. So I have plenty of those. But what's my favorite thing to eat now? Okay, cheese. I'm obsessed with cheese. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm always walking around with a bag of Ziploc cut up cheese. Because the thing is with my imperfect system, I don't absorb everything. So I have to eat a lot. But I don't really mind that at all. And one thing that I realize, especially on hot days, is having a sip of water and being able to have a sip of something. I remember those days where I would just be taking walks outside, looking at people sipping like a bottle of water, and to me they would look like a Baywatch like model, like in the sun. I would just look at that thinking like, when can I have that? I even bought like spray bottles and like